It was Halloween morning, 2007, and Kathy Gillern, a retired officer from the Ithaca Police Department, received a phone call that would forever change her life. Her beloved son, Aeryn Gillern, left work October 29th and hadn't been seen since. It was every mother's worst nightmare, but the worst was yet to come when the search for her son was met with hostility, roadblocks, and cover-up, as she looked for him in a country where she didn't know a single person and didn't speak the language. Hi everyone, welcome to my channel and my newest segment, Art and Crime, where I'll discuss true crime cases while painting a scene related to the case. But before we jump into today's case, I just wanted to give you some content warning. Today we will be discussing homophobia and drowning. So if this is something that could potentially bother you, please don't hesitate to click out at any point. Your mental health is of the utmost importance. And now for our case. Aeryn Gillern was a very handsome young man who stood at 6'2" and quite muscular. His friends described him as fiercely loyal and charismatic, and it just seemed like he was pretty much loved by everybody. One of his friends wrote in a blog that it took a while to get to know him, but once you did, he was a very loyal and true friend, and seems that he was very loved. Aeryn graduated from Franciscan University in Steubenville, Ohio in May of 1997. He had spent a year abroad in Gaming, Austria, where after his initial culture shock, he came to love all things Austrian and would want to move there and live his life out in Austria. Aeryn went on to earn a master's degree from Franciscan, as well as 2 additional masters from Webster American University in Vienna. He loved and valued education. His mother, Kathy Gillern, describes the last time that she saw Aeryn, which was on September 19th, 2007. She says, "I remember looking out my window and watching him walk my dog in the cul-de-sac as he read his well-worn prayers from the Roman breviary. On that day, I took Aeryn to the Syracuse airport. I remember him telling me that he would see me soon and not to cry. He made me laugh as he joked with a TSA woman about a container of his favorite butterscotch pudding that he wanted to take on board. That was the last time I saw my son." A little over a month later, on October 27th, 2007, his mom, Kathy, spoke to Aeryn in Vienna about visiting over Christmas and going to the Christmas market there. They also spoke about her move to Vienna once her home sold so she could be close to him. She had her house on the market. She was talking to him about the market being slow and the showings not really panning out. And so the visit to Vienna over Christmas was more of a temporary solution to not being able to move there quite yet, but that was still her long-term plans. This was October 27th, and that was the last time that she spoke to him. Just a few days later, on Halloween morning, a friend and former colleague of Kathy's from the Ithaca Police Department called her and told her she needed to go home immediately and that there was an urgent message. Kathy could tell by the tone of her voice that something was very wrong. She continued to press on, and her friend finally broke down crying and said her son was missing. Mr. Paul Maselli, HR director at Unido, Aeryn's employer, said he hadn't shown up to work or called, which was very unlike him. He told her that she needed to come to Vienna, said that even though Aeryn had taken some days off in the past, that he had always called, and that the last time they had seen him was when he clocked out or signed out for work the day before. Posse, his partner, spelled P-A-S-I, had told her when she arrived that the apartment was in the exact same condition as when he left it and went to Switzerland before going to Switzerland. And apparently Posse was in Switzerland at the time of Aeryn's disappearance. I tried to find more information on his partner, just like how long they were together, why he was in Switzerland. It sounded like he was there for a business trip. And then, uh, for I know for me, even though I've traveled to Europe a few times, and I live here on the West Coast, it's still kind of startling to me when I think of Europe with all the countries so close and so easy to say, oh, I'm going to Austria or Switzerland or Germany. So it seemed like it was a business trip to Switzerland. They found out that Aeryn was last seen at the Kaisenbrundel sauna in Vienna, and the Kaisenbrundel sauna, if you look it up in LGBT Vienna, says the Kaisenbrundel sauna in Vienna offers pleasurable experiences for men and for drag queen. I'm probably going to butcher this name. Drag queen Tifa Kummernes. The sauna is a very special place and says attractive features are the erotic neo-Baroque wall paintings by Stefan Riedel and the historic 19th century atrium. You can Google the sauna, and there's a lot of pictures easily available of some of these murals, and they're quite accurately described as erotic. I was wondering if that was more of a error in translation, but it was nope. That's it. They're very erotic paintings, and from what I understand is the sauna. It's also called a bathhouse. It's where it seems like it's where you go to. I don't know. I don't want to say this, so if I'm saying this incorrectly, then please absolutely correct me in the comments. But the saunas or the bathhouses seem more of a place you go to with the intention of hooking up with someone over there. I don't know if that's pretty much the only reason you go there for, but it definitely came across as that's the main goal of going to these bathhouses. And this was a bathhouse for male homosexuals. So, and Aeryn went there frequently. It's also in a very nice part of town. It was described as a high-end area with very high-end clients. And one of the reasons they had high-end clients was because they were very discreet in protecting their clientele, which will come into play later on. So this was the last place that he was seen, but I'll go into that in a minute. So Kathy flew over to Vienna just a few days after she found out that her son was missing. It sounds like she pretty much got the first ticket she could or made arrangements and got out of there like a day or two later. She describes her flight to Austria as saying, I remember the flight to Austria and feeling calm because I was going to see Aeryn. I remember thinking he was going to be at the airport to greet me. I only booked the flight for a week. I would spend the week with Aeryn and find out what happened, and then I'll come home and then make plans to go back for Christmas as originally planned. I didn't want to believe that something had happened to him. I just wanted to believe that everything was okay. And, I kind of wondered about that too. That's a long flight. I mean, maybe not so long from New York as it would be from here in Arizona, but still, when you're wondering where your son is and you're told that he's missing, I would have imagined that flight being really stressful and anxious ridden. But I think if she was thinking, yeah, he's going to be there to greet me, he wasn't gone that long. I could see maybe thinking, oh, he maybe had too much to drink and stayed over at a friend's house for the night, or it was a misunderstanding on where he was. And I can definitely see trying to come up with rational reasons for him being missing, especially on a flight when you can't do anything else except sit and wait. And I imagine either way, she said she was calm, but I imagine there was probably some part of her that was anxious about the situation. When she arrived to Austria, the neighbor, his name is Umberto, greeted her in front of Aeryn's apartment with two investigators. Posse was also there with them. And she described in the documentary called Gone the experience as not good, as the investigators wouldn't look her in the eye and barely acknowledged her. And this would be the beginning of this kind of tepid temperature that she got from the police officers and investigators in this. She just continuously described this kind of reception of being cold or hostile. It was one or the other from them, and definitely not an inviting, warm feeling that she got from the officers. So she said that they barely acknowledged her, and they walked into the apartment and immediately went and looked under the bed. And she says you can see the bed from the door, and I'll post a picture here from the documentary. And when you're standing at the door, as you can see directly under the bed. Maybe not completely, but you can see that there's nothing really under the bed. And then they kind of briefly went into the living room, and then they looked around, and then they left. And that was how she described this experience. I don't know why your first initial reaction would be to go look under the bed. I think that was strange. I don't know what they were thinking. Like, did they think she was missing a cat? Like, what? I just don't understand what was happening there. When Kathy told the one officer that she was a retired officer herself, and that officers in the United States tend to look out for one another, he kind of just shrugged it off, like, as if not to care. And this was, and I know that's kind of the case here, and I think that's kind of any industry. If you're in an industry, you tend to kind of look out for your own, right? And she just was, I guess, hoping to build a bridge with them, maybe gain some empathy to try to get them to help her or open up a little bit, warm up to her, and it didn't work. So after they had left, Kathy and a translator called the police to find out what had happened, to see what else had gone on. And what they told her is they said they dredged the Danube Canal, said they wouldn't search the sauna, the bathhouse, because, quote unquote, there was no reason to. And they had canine search. Kathy asked how they used canines without Aeryn's clothes and scents. And the officers kind of questioned her and said, well, you said you were working for the police. You would know how that works then. So it was just really cold in his response. And when she asked why they had dredged the canal, and they said they had dredged the canal because a fisherman had seen a body floating by while he was fishing from the bank. They didn't make a connection at the time between this body floating in the canal and Aeryn. This was just that they got a call that somebody was floating in the canal, and this is why they went and checked out the canal. They weren't connecting the two because they didn't know about Aeryn's disappearance until a couple of days later. And so they didn't make that connection. So it wasn't because of Aeryn. So from what I'm gathering this far, and a lot of this is coming from the documentary, and the documentary is 100% from Kathy's perspective. And she shares her story, and that's pretty much what this documentary is. If you're going into this hoping that this documentary is going to show interviews from different people and different investigations, it doesn't. It is just purely her perspective on the situation. So it does leave you with a lot of questions. You also kind of have to wonder how much is lost in translation. And this was back in 2007, so this was a while ago that this happened. So, there's a lot of emotion there. So I kind of did walk away from the documentary really having more questions than anything. But again, this was her perspective, and she said, so she was sharing what happened, and she said that, the next morning, the neighbor woke her up, said that they had received a message from Lieutenant Ernstein to call the embassy, and the neighbor, Umberto, kept saying that the police kept changing their story, and every time they would talk to them, that there would be a change in the story. And the police's theory, this is what they said they think happened, or their theory of what happened to Aeryn, is spontaneous suicide. They said he was HIV tested, and he was HIV positive, and what they stated was that it was common for homosexuals in Vienna to commit suicide spontaneously because of this. Um, so obviously that alone comes off as, to me, homophobic. Um, and again, I don't know how much of this may have been lost in translation, if that was what they actually said, or if they say whatever they said, by the time you translate it into English, it just doesn't translate the same way or the same context or the same intent. I speak another language, and I know that there's definitely some phrases that we say, and I speak Armenian, so I know there's phrases we say, and if you translate it directly to English, it sounds absolutely ridiculous. But in Armenian, it makes sense. So I wonder how much of that was lost in translation. And it sounds like the translators, what in Vienna, they speak kind of a broken German, or kind of like a slang German, from what I'm understanding. And I don't know, I sound like the translator was either not proficient in their dialect or in translating to English. So there will be further miscommunication, I think, from that. So I'm going to kind of take that with a grain of salt. I don't want to assume that that's true, because that's kind of horrible, So I don't want to assume that that's what they were saying, but it definitely comes across that way. And Posse was there as well. Remember, this is Aeryn's partner, and he says, well, that's not possible because Aeryn was HIV negative. And the police asked him, how did you know he was HIV negative? And he said, well, he literally got the results of his test that morning on the 29th that he disappeared, and they were negative. And he told me this. And the police kind of shrug it off. So their theory, obviously, at that point, if that's really what their theory was, doesn't make sense. And they kind of, I can go more into this in a little bit, because they do kind of have to answer some questions later on. So is it possible that things were lost in translation? Yes. And they do claim that certain things weren't said. So I don't know if that's true or if it was a translation thing. So kind of take this for a grain of salt. They also said that at 6:50 p.m., Aeryn ran out of the bathhouse at 6:50 p.m. And then Posse, again, said that was impossible because they were texting back and forth at this time. And also Aeryn's friend spoke to him just before 6:50 p.m. on the phone based on the timestamps, and he was totally fine. So the police said, well, it must be an incorrect time on the phone. And the translator kind of spoke up at this point and said, well, that's not possible either, because you don't set the time on your phone. Your phone pulls from satellite and pulls the time from that, and it's gone. It goes to the company. Like, I've never set the time on my phone. It just knows the time, and you set your time zone, but that's it. You don't set your time on your phone. So I don't know what they were saying, why they would think that, or if they were just trying to brush it off. And then the translator, they continue to talk to the translator, and the translator, you could tell, is visibly upset at this point at the questioning, and she's kind of not wanting to translate what they're saying at this point. And Kathy just looks at her, and the translator, you could tell, it's very uncomfortable with translating what she's about to translate. And then she says, they want to know, are you proud that your son was Mr. Gay Austria? And Kathy, taken aback, kind of smiles back at the officer in a very fake smile, of course, and says, extremely. And that question obviously has no bearing whatsoever on this. Like, why does that matter? Why does it matter that he was Mr. Gay Austria? The only thing I can think of is you're thinking maybe there was hostility with the contest. I don't know. Like, that's what I would hope you're thinking. But it was obviously a very off-putting conversation. And this reminds me that of a story that Kathy shares in the documentary. And I think it's such a sweet story and very telling of the relationship. And she says that when Aeryn was younger, he called her and said, "Hey, I have something to talk to you about." And he's very serious. And he basically comes out and tells her that he's gay. And she laughs. And he's kind of like, "Wait, why are you laughing? I just told you I'm gay. Why are you laughing?" And she says, "Well, because I know you're gay." And he goes, "What, you do?" And she goes, "Yeah, I've known you were gay since you were a teenager." And he's just really dumbfounded by her response. And he goes, "Well, who else knows?" And she goes, "Well, your grandmother knows." And he's surprised even more. He goes, "What? She does?" And she says, "Yeah, she knows. We know. Like, it's just not a big deal." And she says he never talked about it, so she never talked about it. She didn't think anything of it. And, Aeryn at this point was a little upset. And he's like, "Well, I wanted to tell her this. Was a big deal. And I had this moment. And I wanted to call her." And Kathy says, "You still can. Just give me a minute. Let me call your grandmother and tell her to act surprised when you call." And and so he does, and he calls her back, and he goes, "Yeah, she did it. She pretended to be surprised." I got to tell her that I was gay, and I thought that was such a cute story. I thought that was the way it should be, right? And I just thought that was such a sweet story. And Aeryn wanted to be a priest at one point, and he was told he could practice celibacy as a priest in the seminary, but he would have to preach against homosexuality. So he walked away from that dream, but he definitely was still very much in love with Catholicism. And Aeryn had a calling early on in life to become a Roman Catholic priest. He said, "I had attended 12 years of Catholic school and became a lapsed," or she says, sorry, apologies. Kathy says, "I had attended 12 years of Catholic school and became a lapsed Catholic at best. So this was truly Aeryn's choice. He loved going to Mass, especially when he was able to find a Latin Rites Mass." After graduating from college, Aeryn entered the seminary in Graz, Austria. "I used to joke with him about becoming the first American-born pope, and he in turn would call me Mama de Papa." For Aeryn, being in the seminary was an eye-opener. He realized that for him to become a priest, he would also need to become a hypocrite. Aeryn was gay, and we need to preach against homosexuality. Aeryn and I had many conversations about this, and in the end, he decided that he could serve the church in other ways, and left the seminary. And I was raised Orthodox. I'm not religious anymore, but even as somebody who's not religious, it is, when watching the Latin rituals in the church, it is quite beautiful. Regardless how you feel about religion, I think it's almost like watching um, a performance or a play. It's just, there's the chanting. I think Latin's a beautiful language. My son was taking it for a little bit, so I can see his appeal there. And so that was, but he still he took her to the Mass there. And she ended up, Kathy would, spend every anniversary, in fact, in front of the church and hold his picture up for years to come, asking people if they had seen him, if they knew him. So this was part of what she was doing. So I'm going to kind of recap what kind of happened over the next few years. So unfortunately, her experience with the police never improved. This was her experience throughout. And I can't even imagine what it is like to have your son go missing. On top of that, you're in a very unfamiliar territory. You're in a different country where, they speak a different language. So you're not familiar with anything. You don't know anybody there. So I can't even imagine how much harder that made it all, and for me, a child going missing and not having answers is the worst possible thing that can happen. And not being able to just close that door, close that chapter, to let that rest, to me, is just, you're wondering what happened. Are they okay? Did they suffer? All these questions as a parent, I just think it's the absolute worst nightmare. And Kathy says that she does not believe he's alive anymore, but there's still that unknown. And she even said, and she made this statement, I thought it was so profound. She says, "Does a mother refer to her missing son in the past or present tense? I think you will find that I switch back and forth because although I believe Aeryn is no longer alive, he is and he was." And it's just heartbreaking. She has a website where she posts updates to what's going on, her trips out there, and there's a ton of information on this website. You could spend a very long time going through. She has links up for every progressive step that they've made in trying to figure out what happened to Aeryn. I'll post a link for that on the comments or in the description below. But I'm going to go through on February 10th, 2009. Remember, he went missing in 2007. The Minister of the Interior released results of a formal inquest that had been requested by the Green Party members of Parliament. And the Green Party members of Parliament would end up playing an integral role in trying to help figure out what's going on with Aeryn. And from what I understand, they're still involved. This is still an unsolved case. He's still missing. And the Green Party is still very much involved in trying to help them find Aeryn. So the results from the inquest I'm going to go through because it kind of recaps what was going on. So question 1, are investigations still pending or is the file closed? They say an investigation on this case is ongoing. Question 2, how is the probable course of events of the disappearance of Aeryn Gillern to your perception? They answer, based on the case record, the course of events was as follows. Mr. Gillern got into an argument with another sauna guest between 7 and 7:30 p.m. Remember, the original time was 6. On October 29th, 2007. The argument started when the other guest asked Mr. Gillern how he was. Subsequently, Mr. Gillern suddenly, and for no apparent reason, ran outdoors naked from the sauna. Later, 2 eyewitnesses were found who saw a naked, bald man, evidently Gillern, running through the 1st District of Vienna toward the Danube Canal, which is different from the Danube River. And shortly thereafter, a fisherman on the Danube Canal at Hermann Park in 1030 Vienna noticed a bald man drifting in the water there who called for help and then sank in the water. It's not funny. I'm laughing at how they handle this. It can be assumed with a probability verging on certainty that the man drifting in the water was Gillern. I mean, okay, I'm going to go to the next part before I state how I feel about this. So regarding the next question, how many persons were interrogated altogether by the responsible investigators in this connection? Answer, based on the case record, written statements were taken from 7 persons regarding the matter. Information was obtained by telephone from another 10 persons. They originally had told Kathy that there were no witnesses. She explains her perception of Vienna. She says it's a very pedestrian, heavy, friendly city. And from what I've researched as well, this seems to be true. People are constantly outside. They don't stay in their homes at all. Even when the weather is cold, they'll be sitting outside drinking their tea or their coffee. They're out and about. People are always walking around. There's always somebody out and about. You're never going to be pretty much alone on the street, and which I think is amazing. I love that. So when they originally told her there were no witnesses, she found this obviously hard to believe. And so now it's coming out that there were witnesses and that they spoke to them. They do explain later on that is because she was speaking to the 1st District police officers. The calls and the witnesses were calling into the 3rd District, which Okay, I can see how that can be true. So the next question, how does the police get the opinion that a positive HIV test can be a motive for suicide if such an actual test was part of the belongings of the missing person and was conveyed to the police afterwards? So when Kathy went to go pick up Aeryn's belongings from the police department, the ones that were left in the sauna, there was an actual HIV test result in his belongings, and it said it was negative, and he received this that day on October 29th. So it's just the idea that they would say that's his reasoning for suicide is preposterous, because he had gotten answers that day that said negative. But this is what they say. There is no indication in the record that the investigators considered a positive HIV test, if there was one, as a reason for suicide by Mr. Gillern. So they're basically saying that didn't happen. So again, did the translator mess something up in translation, or did they completely just lie? So next question, how do you explain for yourself the fact that Aeryn Gillern verifiably used his phone after 1900, so 7 o'clock, which remained in the sauna, although he is said to have left the sauna already before that time? And the answer is the assumed time of the argument in the sauna, as well as the departure from the sauna, is based on the statements made by several witnesses. Since the missing person report was filed on November 1st, 2007, 3 days after the incident in the sauna, and only at this time could a connection by name be made between the unknown man in the Danube Canal and Mr. Gillern. The time of the departure from the sauna could no longer be determined exactly, since the witness statements diverge. For the 7 p.m. time, the supposed time of the departure from the sauna, it is therefore a matter of the earliest possible time according to the witness statements. One witness gave 7:30 p.m. as a possible time in answering the investigators' questions. Eyewitness report having noticed a naked man running toward the Danube Canal at about 8 p.m. The telephone call of the witness who noticed a man drifting in the Danube Canal took place precisely at 8:21 p.m. So the next question, were these contradictions recorded in the file and worked on? Answer, since the time of departure from the sauna could not be determined exactly, there is no contradiction with the time of Mr. Gillern's telephone calls. I think that can be argued, but I'll go on. Next question, what was the content of this emergency call? And the answer, a man is drifting in the water of the Danube Canal near Urania, which is a cafe, bar, and restaurant, or Herman's stand bar. He's shouting for help. And question, which measures were taken because of the call? Sending of several patrol vehicles, notification of the fire department and the diving squad, as well as the rescue service. The next question, did a search with divers take place? Which unit did execute the search? And how many divers were on duty? And how are their numbers? Answer, no. According to the fire department, a diver operation was not possible, or else did not seem sensible because of the strong current. So this inquest is written, or the answers, question answers are written. It's not in English, so it's been translated. I'm really hoping that sensible, the word sensible, was mistranslated. It did not seem sensible because of the strong current. I mean, I know that I've seen some of these divers, current can definitely have an impact, but I don't know. I feel like from all the cases that I've seen that it doesn't stop a search. To me, it just seemed very, I don't know if this is normal, but you get a call that somebody's basically drowning in the river or canal, and your answer is go out and look for 30 minutes, and oh well, the current's kind of tough and he's probably gone under, so what can you do? I mean, that's just kind of the impression I got from how they're handling this, and it was very off-putting. I don't know. I just know from here, if something like that happens, I mean, they go to such extent to try to find somebody, even though you know that the chances of finding them alive are pretty much non-existent. It's just shocking to me that that was such a response about somebody. It's not just Aeryn. It's at the time they didn't know who it was. They just get a call. This fisherman who's sitting on the bank fishing sees somebody who is alive and drowning. He's calling for help. So this fisherman calls the emergency services. The emergency services come out, and their response is to give it a 30-minute go. Like, let's look for this guy for 30 minutes, and oh well, it's kind of rough waters, so moving on. Like, that's just kind of the impression I got from all of this, and it was just shocking to me because they didn't do anything after that. Like, okay, did the currents, are the currents always like that? Are there other things you can do? Can you maybe use radar, ultrasound, or something to look for him? Anything, like anything? It's just, I don't know. I just was so baffled by this response. And I don't think this is something that's lost in translation, because this is this story that's shared in multiple different ways throughout the years, is that they didn't search for this person who went drowning in the river, in the canal. And it's just shocking to me because, yeah, we can assume that's Aeryn, based on the timing and stuff, but either way, they didn't know that. It's just some random person who's drowning, and you didn't really give it a good faith effort to me. It's just so heartbreaking and so shocking to me. But moving on. So from when to when was the mission executed? Answer: specifically from 8:21 to 9:21 p.m. Further search measures continued after that. So when they say the mission was executed from 8:21 to 9:21, and then further search measures continued after that, they don't really explain what that is. So I don't know what, like, is it like a bolo, or is it a, hey, keep an eye out if you see a body pop up? I don't know what that exactly means. In which area was the mission executed? And answer: site of operation, Vienna District 1, beginning at, I am not even going to try to pronounce this correctly, Urania Strasse number 1. After that, downstream, searching on both banks of the Danube Canal. And site of operation, confluence of the Vienna River with the Danube Canal. For which reasons was the mission stopped without results? Answered: on account of the strong current prevailing at the operation site, further searching was judged to be hopeless and therefore terminated. Question: were there search dogs in addition to the divers? If yes, which traces were searched for? Answer: no, since there were no indications calling for deployment of search dogs. A possible connection with the missing person was made only after the missing person report was filed on November 1st, 2007. That's only a couple of days. You could still use a search dog. But anyways, did further searches take place in this case since the search of 29th of October? If yes, of which kind were these searches? When did they take place, and with what result? Answer: beside the search operation on October 29th, no other targeted or coordinated search operations have taken place. Nonetheless, the office in charge of the case, the Vienna State Detective Bureau, initiated an alerting of the regular police units. Unfortunately, however, the activity did not provide any concrete leads or starting points for a further planned search operation. So they're kind of contradicting themselves at this point, because a few questions earlier they said, yeah, the mission was executed from 8:21 to 9:21 p.m. They gave it a whole hour looking for this person who was drowning. And then they say further search measures continued after that. But here they're saying, no, we didn't really continue anything because you couldn't. There was nothing to do. I don't know. Maybe they should watch CSI or something, because there's definitely some stuff you can do. Was there contact with another Danube neighboring countries concerning the probable finding unknown drowning victims? I assume they mean either Danube neighboring, like counties, not countries, but anyways. The answer: a notice was issued in accordance with the regulations for searches and requests for information. To follow up the search activities, a special notification was undertaken via Detective Headquarters of the Danube Riparian States. The Federal Investigative Bureau initiated a worldwide Interpol search regarding the disappearance of Gillern, including his DNA profile. Next question, were there handed out copies of the file in this case to the mother of the missing person? If not, why not? And answer, according to the case officer's report of the facts on March 5th, 2008, the mother was not given a copy of the case record because the legal basis for this was absent. And that's all they say about that. Next questions. Are the accusations of the mother concerning the non-cooperative and of presentiments against gays characterized behavior of the investigating officials appropriate? If not, which investigation measures were set to verify these reproaches? If yes, which disciplinary measures were set until now or will be in future concerning this non-appropriate behavior? Answer, according to the communication from the state police headquarters in Vienna, which is in charge of the case, the investigative officials deny engaging in such behavior. The checking of the accusations in this regard is not yet concluded. Up to now, the state police headquarters in Vienna sees no cause for disciplinary or administrative law measures. In regard to possible relevance of the accusations on file in terms of criminal law, I can report that on November 24th, 2008, Federal Police Headquarters in Vienna received the Gillern complaint file in question. Based on this file, the office has begun to undertake inquiries accordingly by consulting the original records, contacting officials responsible for the investigation of the missing person case in question, etc. These inquiries have not been concluded. The Vienna State Prosecutor's Office will receive a final report on this matter in any case. I did look for an update on this, and I could not find anything, but that doesn't mean it's not there. This is obviously a different country, different continent. I don't know how available these records would be. Kind of, relying on Kathy to update the website with this kind of stuff, but if she hasn't, then, there's nothing, if she hasn't and she's gotten it, or I'm assuming that there's not been an update because I feel like she would have posted it if there was. Next question, is there a connection of the approach of police to the case with the letter of complaint Aeryn Gillern wrote, in which he complained about inappropriate, brutal treatment by policemen on the occasion of a ticket control on January 11th, 2003? And very simple answer came back as no. So in 2003, Aeryn retells a story, and I think it was through either a letter he wrote or it was in his journal, but he retells this story basically, and he does retell his story in a pretty factual manner. I was pretty impressed by it, and he goes through almost step by step through the timeline of what happened. It's extensive. It can be found again on the website, which I'll post a link in the description. It is pretty extensive, but to recap what happened, he was, what I'm understanding, going on the subway or the train, and he, I think, forgot to scan whatever the card was, or didn't scan it correctly, and in the end was very, very mishandled by the police on how this was. I think they found out he was gay and just took it to extreme measures. He had to involve his friends. All of this trying to just say he was trying to pay that, and they arrested him. They searched his apartment. They manhandled him. It was just really, it was such an awful story, and I just felt so heartbroken reading it because I know this happens out there, but it's just senseless. Like, why does this happen? Why does this have to happen? And it was just, I didn't want to read the story because it is so heartbreaking, and this case is already heartbreaking enough. But he does retell it, and I love kind of reading from his words because it's almost like an echo, like a phantom voice. But it was just such a horrible experience, and I 100% believe that he experienced it the way he retold it. And I feel like he even maybe underplayed it a little bit, and it was worse than how he retold it. Like I said, he kind of went through a timeline. It was very factual. Um, he didn't really go through his feelings as much, but I just get the impression that it was such a traumatizing, horrible experience. Um, and the question is saying, is there a connection? And the police are like, no. And I believe that. I believe there's no connection. The reason why I believe it, I just think my idea is that these people are just, not these people like the whole police force, but I just feel like whoever he was encountering, maybe it was this small group of people in this police department or whatever it was just not, they're just homophobic is just what it comes down to. So do I believe that there's a connection? No, I think that's just who they are. That's just how they treat them. I don't know if it was a combination of homophobia and maybe he's this foreigner, he's American, whatever it is. It's just a horrible thing. And I believe them. I don't believe there's a connection. So, but it is a story that I think you should probably read. It's horrible, horrible, horrible. Next question. Do you think the procedure of the police is appropriate in this case? Do you think the procedure of the police in this case is favorable for the picture of Austria in the world? And I thought that was such a fantastic question. Answer. According to the reports received, it can be assumed on the basis of the case record that proper procedures were followed. And then the translator opinions and views are not the subject of parliamentary interpolation law. Interpolation. I don't think I'm saying that right. And basically they're saying we don't care what people's opinions are. We have to handle our law the way we do, which I respect that. I thought it was a great question. I actually thought it was a great answer too. Does this affect how people see you guys? And their answer was like, no, this is law. But this wasn't law. They weren't treating it that way. So if they had treated it, if they had followed a procedure that made sense, then that would be fantastic, right? You would say, okay, you don't care what people's opinions are because you want to follow the law. You want to find justice. But that wasn't what was happening. So while the answer is great, it didn't pertain to how they actually handled it. Next, and the last question was, how do you want to assure in the future that relatives of missing persons, no matter if Austrian or from abroad, come across in forthcoming, compassionate, and comprehensible manner? Answer. Independent of the case at hand, I may point out that the department has been given a relevant project tasking that concerns dealing with interested parties in connection with cases of disappearance. In connection with that, training content is to be developed accordingly. I mean, isn't that kind of your generic answer? Like, yeah, we're working on a department that's going to handle training. I don't buy that for a second. That's kind of your generic answer. Yeah, we'll put that in the to-do list. Is basically what they're saying. So May 6, 2015, Kathy updates the website. And this is going on 8 years now after 8 years. My math right? Yeah, 8 years after. I was informed today that the cold case squad has spent 3 days searching the Danube Canal for Aeryn's remains using the Cobra team, with divers using specialized equipment, including sonar. I think I said ultrasound earlier. I meant sonar. So I definitely did not mean ultrasound. They search from Freudenau, it's the end of the canal towards the east, and went until Urania, where the fisherman was located. And there is a link on the website too. It's in German, but being translated gives a general idea of what they did. The fact that they did this and are taking it seriously is encouraging, according to Joseph Gepp, an investigative journalist with Profile. They have not given up and will continue to work their leads and interview people. So 2015, Aeryn went missing in 2007. 2015 is when they finally decided to search the canal. And it wasn't even the police that did that. It was basically cold cold case squad that had some divers do it. They didn't find anything, but I mean, are we really surprised? Because I don't know if you remember in the Lacey Peterson case, she was found, oh gosh, let's see, she went missing Christmas and she was found in April. So a little over 4 months after she went missing, she was found in the water. And there was like hardly anything left of her. And we're talking 8 years later. So are we surprised? Um, Especially with a canal that apparently has some strong currents. Are we going to find anything? I just don't think we will. I mean, it would have to be like a Lake Mead situation where the water dried up and you just found bones on the side of the canal or something. That's pretty much the only way I can think of finding any kind of remains. But I'm happy they did it. I'm happy they did something. I just think it was done in vain, unfortunately. But I'm still glad that they did it. And Kathy updates. So she updates every year. She goes to Vienna every single year on the anniversary. She stands in front of the church and she holds up his picture. There's pictures on the website where people join her as well. And those first few weeks after Aeryn disappeared, she would walk up and down. She would take the train to the end of the line and then walk back to his apartment alongside the canal. And then she would stand in front of the bathhouse for hours asking people if they had seen him. And she did this for as long as she could. And she stayed there as long as she could. And then she couldn't keep paying her mortgage and his rent. And unfortunately, she had to close the apartment down and come back to the States. And she in the documentary gets very emotional, understandably so, talking about this, and says that, it was one of the hardest things that she's ever had to do. And she collects his things. And she gave a lot of this stuff away because she couldn't bring it all back. She shipped back whatever she could. So he had movies and music and photos. So she shipped back as much as she could. Like, she would keep one fork, one plate, one spoon, and then give away the other items. And, she describes it. She says he made a home. He had decorations up, and he had his kitchen set up, and he's got his washing machines, and he's got his, he made it home. He was staying there. And here she was packing that up without answers. I mean, it's just so heartbreaking to me to do that. And I think it's just, I can imagine Vienna that visit is bittersweet because he loved it so much. He thought it was his home. He was bringing her to live there, to be close to him. She was going to move there. And I'm sure it was bittersweet. On the 15th anniversary of Aeryn's disappearance, she says on the website, "Once again, I will not be traveling to Vienna for the 15th anniversary of Aeryn's disappearance. My mother will be 105 and 7 months old on October 29th. 105. I am all she has, and she is my responsibility. Due to her extreme old age, it is necessary for me to be here for her. Luckily, she's just down the road, and I'm able to spend time with her every day or evening. There are no updates regarding Aeryn's disappearance. It will be 4 years in December since I heard secondhand that the cold case squad was no longer considering Aeryn's disappearance as an active investigation. People that were actively involved and gave so much of their time and energy have moved on, but are still in touch. I will remain eternally grateful for everything they did and their friendship." And that was on the 15th anniversary. And then following that, we had COVID, so traveling became impossible. Her last update was that that her mother was 105, which, oh my gosh, the dichotomy, right? You can't go continue your search for your son who's gone far too young because your mother, who's 105, needs you as well. And I'm sure she just felt ripped into. And it breaks my heart because they don't have answers. And I don't know if they ever will, because she's fighting such an uphill battle with being in a different country and not being able to investigate the way she would in the States. I'm sure as a retired police officer, she felt even more helpless because this is what she did. She this was her job, and she can't do that in a different country. And in fact, who she would consider her comrades were fighting her against it. She did at one point share that she went, one of the times that she was in front of the bathhouse, like I said, she would spend hours in front of the bathhouse with a photo of Aeryn, asking people if they'd seen him. And the manager at the bathhouse came out at one point with a translator, and the translator was either American or Canadian. And he says, "Would you like a tour of the bathhouse?" And she's surprised, and she says, "Yeah, of course I would." And he brings her inside, and they start walking through, and she says, obviously there's men there, and they kind of look at her with their eyes really big, and I'm like, "Oh, what is she doing here?" Which, doesn't surprise me. And they're walking through, and she's, trying to take everything in and trying to get a lay of the land, basically, without being so obvious that she was trying to be investigative in the tour. And she says they get to this one point, and the manager gets very emotional, and he's kind of like gesturing to the ground, to the floor, and Kathy kind of intuitionally wants to like rest her hand on his shoulder to comfort him, and the translator says, "No, no, no, don't do that, don't touch him." And she says, "Why?" And she says, "He's having a moment, just let him be." And basically she finds out that he's being emotional because of Aeryn, and apparently that was the last place he had seen Aeryn. And Kathy asks, "On the ground?" And she says, "Yes." And Kathy tries to ask questions, and the translator says, "No, it doesn't matter. He's just gone." And just says that over and over again, and wouldn't answer her questions. And I think that's part of the one thing that has me held up in this, is what happened. They said there was an argument at the bathhouse, and Aeryn was nearby, is how it's described. They don't even say that he was involved. They just say he was nearby. So what I'm understanding is he's at the bathhouse. He's naked because that's what you do at the bathhouse. You're naked, right? So he runs out of the bathhouse. One of the witnesses spoke to a journalist at one point and described, they said they saw Aeryn running down the street naked, and they thought it was some sort of like college prank. So they did like a wolf whistle, cat call, wolf whistle. And Aeryn turns around and looks at them, and they say that the look on his face was absolute terror. Like he was terrified. And then he continues to run down and towards the canal. What I think is it's hard to say, because if you're looking at a case, an American case, even then you take the information with a grain of salt, right? Because eyewitness testimony can only be taken so far. Now add to it a completely different language. We don't know if they're even describing it the way that we're understanding it. And the other thing too is this witness called the journalist there after it was posted in a newspaper article. And I know, especially from experience, from, talking about cases in my true crime groups or whatever it is, people want to get involved. They just want to be involved, which is weird to me because I've never wanted that. I've had, A lot of you know that Travis Alexander was somebody I knew. That was a huge true crime case, and I didn't want to be involved. I didn't want to get these calls. I didn't want to be involved, and I don't want to be at the court. I didn't want all of that. So when people who aren't anywhere related to a case want to be involved, it's just, I don't get it. I just don't get that kind of, especially when it gets to the point where they start to interfere and create false testimony and all these different things. I just will never understand that. I'm not saying that's what these people did, but it happens, and it happens enough where I would be very concerned about taking that one single eyewitness testimony as truth. However, you add it to everything else that people reported, and it becomes a little bit more believable, if that makes sense. And so it's just harder to really know what happened, and just sad to me, very sad. And like I said, you can go to the website, you can get all these links for everything. So I'm gonna recap basically my final thoughts, and some questions I have. But before I do, I'm compelled to bring something up that I found kind of at the last minute. Was a comment that Kathy had made either on the website or on their Facebook page, and I'll link the Facebook page as well. And she makes this comment, and in fact, I know it's on the website because she references the Facebook page. She basically says, and I'm paraphrasing, that she doesn't like that these YouTube videos are being made. She speaks to a couple of different people who have made YouTube videos, and they have not consulted her before posting it, and they're basically making money off the backs of her son missing. She is absolutely entitled to her opinion. She is justified in her opinion. Her son went missing. She has no answers. She can feel however she wants to feel, and it is absolutely okay. And I contemplated making this not only a video, but my very first art and crime video. And, when I first heard this, it was through a YouTube crime channel. It was through Stephanie Harlow. And she made this video a while ago, and I wouldn't have even known about this if it wasn't for YouTube. So while I absolutely can appreciate and understand and even feel compassion for what she said, there are people that will do this for nefarious reasons, and they will do it just for the attention for themselves. But I don't think Stephanie Harlow does it for that reason. I wouldn't watch her if I thought she did. I don't think the people that I watch do it for that reason. Sometimes they go in that direction, and I feel like they do. And I do stop watching those people. I think that if your heart is in the right place, then it's okay. And like I said, I wouldn't have even known about this had it not been for YouTube. I would not have known about this. I watched a documentary because of YouTube. I watched I went to her website because of this. So while I agree with her that people do it for the wrong reasons, I also know that she's probably not as aware of how this might work. And I don't want to say that in an offensive way. I'm just saying that I just don't think she sees it the same way a lot of us see it, and that's okay. But I just wanted to put that out there, and I doubt she'll ever watch this, but she does, and I respect your opinion. But I do feel like I want to share his story and help get the word out, and I don't want this information to die out. And and she does state that people move on, and that broke my heart, and that was one of the reasons I wanted this to be the first case I covered. Him and I share a birthday. It was one of the first things Stephanie said in her video, and it caught my attention. I'm like, oh my gosh. He's only a few years older than me, and we share a birthday, and it kind of hit close to home. And he seemed like he was kind of sassy, and so am I. And I just felt like this bond with this person that went missing before I even knew he existed. And I just wanted to get his story out there and share that story with others in hope to keep this story alive, to help maybe get some answers. I feel like somebody knows something. I know somebody knows something. And I'm hoping that their conscience wakes up one day and says, you know what? I don't want to live my life not giving this information to people that need to know it. And I feel like there are answers. Yes, the police absolutely hindered any kind of answers being given, but somebody in that bathhouse was there that day that can pass on this information of what happened. Anything that would help. They can even say what the fight was, whoever that fight was with. Maybe they'll come forward. They can do it anonymously, just something to give this poor woman some answers on what happened to her son. Something to give her closure. Do I think that they'll ever find his body? I don't. I really don't think they will. I just want her to get some answers. I'm hoping that this is just one step in helping her get answers, and that's why I'm doing this, and that's why I wanted it to be my first case I covered in art and crime. But with that said, I'm going to give my final thoughts on this case. I mentioned a few times throughout the video that I'm sure a lot of things got lost in translation. The documentary takes place from one perspective, and that's Kathy's, and that's a very, very, very important perspective. I just felt like I was lacking in other perspectives. I found out through the website that her younger son, traveled with her. He actually showed up in Vienna. I think it was like a week after that she got there in Vienna to look for Aeryn. So he was there for a lot of this. It's not mentioned in the documentary. I assume he doesn't want any part of the attention, the media attention, which I can absolutely respect and understand. Obviously, I would have loved to maybe hear his perspective. But there's no other perspective. We don't get to hear from the translators or anybody at his workplace. Apparently his employers kind of said, we can't help you anymore, and they stopped responding to phone calls. I do know that some other countries, they not necessarily are afraid, but they definitely have a more private perspective when it comes to things like this. Like, oh no, let's let the media or let's let the government handle it. This is not our place. I know this from firsthand experience. My mom comes from a different country. My in-law comes from a different country. So my husband was born in a different country. So I know that this is just a cultural thing in many ways. It's not right or wrong. It's just different ways of living. And so does that mean that there's something shady going on? No. Does it mean that there's not? No. We don't know. And I think that's what it comes down to, is we really don't know. We don't know anything. Things get lost in translation, but what things get lost in translation? What was said that we got correctly? What was said that we didn't get correctly? I would love to know what else is happening. Like, I would love to hear from somebody else, whether it's Posse or Umberto, or even in certain pictures, Posse's face is blurred out, but Umberto's is not. Like, why is that? Is that just more of that privacy thing? So I definitely would love to hear from different people about what happened, and I feel like we could possibly get more answers that way. There was a lot of things that were also left that I feel like I kind of make a joke with my husband. Like, if he's retelling a story, I always have questions and he doesn't have the answer. I didn't ask that question. Like, you don't ask enough questions. Like, I'm that person. Like, I want to know every single detail. If you say, hey, I walked outside the house, and be like, what were you wearing? Did you put on shoes? Was there urgent? What was the weather? Were you in a rush? Like, I have all these questions because I want to paint this picture. I don't know if that's the writer in me, because if you paint a picture without painting it, or the artist in me, those details, I can't see the picture. And so there's a lot of things when Kathy retold the story, and yes, it was a documentary, so she's telling it years and years of experience in this short documentary, and then it's edited, so it's at no fault to her. But there was things like when the manager said that was the last place he saw him. I just want to know, like, wait, on the floor? Was he conscious? Did he get into a fight? Why was he on the floor? Like, all these questions that I just feel like would give us something. And we don't get that. So I'm left with a lot of questions. Um, and, if I can talk to Kathy, I would love to, but I also at the same time don't want to impede on anybody's private space. The body in the canal, um, I think I feel comfortable myself assuming that's Aeryn as well, just because of the timing. It does seem like it would be him. Otherwise, there's two very crazy cases happening at the same time. Why is somebody in the water? Um, and then he's asking for help, and then it's submerged. So why did he end up? He was running. If we go by the story that we kind of can put together very minimally, he was running for his life. He was terrified and went into the water naked. Um, I just don't. I don't know why, and then he drowned. I know that my husband and I have a friend of ours who drowned a few years ago. It's a very muscular person, and what I didn't know until that happened was the more muscular you are, the harder it is to swim. It's hard. You can sink. Like, he had almost no. I think he had like 2 or 3% body fat. It made it very easy for him to drown, which I didn't know. So, good news for me. I have like a lot of body fat, so no problem with me sinking. But so I don't know if maybe that contributed to it. That's why maybe he was trying to escape and thought he could make it across the canal and couldn't. And maybe he saw the fisherman and asked for help, thinking that he would get it, and it just wasn't possible. So hard to say. There was also, the bathhouse the sauna was, like I said, it contributed to a higher clientele. And part of the reason being is that they were very good at protecting clients' information. They even had separate parking that was hidden. So this theory has been brought up before that it's possible that something happened and whoever was chasing him wasn't taking a direct route, or they were maybe in a car and went in a different way. So I think that's definitely quite possible. So that's definitely possible, and especially if he doesn't know who's pursuing him, he's running. He just knows maybe somebody's pursuing him. I don't think Aeryn's alive. I think, especially because Kathy doesn't. I do believe in mother's intuition. I feel like moms know. They just know. Like, I know when my son is sick before he's sick. I do every single time. I know he's sick before he's sick. It's just a mother's intuition. Same with my daughter. And even the day she was born, the second day, I'm like, something's off. Turned out she had COVID. And all she was doing was sleeping more than normal. What's more than normal? She was 1 day old. I didn't have anything to gauge that, but I just knew something was off. She was fine in the end, but I just knew something was off. And I only knew her for a day, but a mother knows. So the fact that Kathy doesn't think he's with us anymore is enough for me. And my biggest hang up for me, if everything is, maybe something happened and he ran or whatever, but what I don't understand is when the manager describes him being on the floor. And I wish I just had more information on just that alone. Because, like I said, I want to know, was he conscious? Was he unconscious? Why was he on the floor? Was he hurt? Would that have contributed to his ability to, run? Is that why he drowned? Was he hurt? Did he get hit on the head? What was the fight about? When the retelling said in the inquest that somebody said, "How are you doing?" and he had an overreaction and then ran out of the sauna. I don't buy that for 1 second. I do not buy that for 1 second. There was no indication that Aeryn was a type of person who would overreact to a question like that. I don't believe that's what happened. That sounds like exactly what somebody says to cover up for somebody else. I don't believe that for 1 second. I don't think he just had an overreaction, and I don't think he ran out of the sauna just because somebody asked him that question. Somebody just says, "Oh, well, there's some fights with some tourists." It's so vague to me. And you say tourists, so are you saying tourists because they're maybe speaking a different language, like English? So could Aeryn be the tourist? And they're saying he was in the area of the fight, but they never said he's involved and then he's on the floor. Like, it's just, the retelling is very vague. I do think a lot of that has to do with the translation. Like, maybe when they say he's in the area, that's not what they meant. They meant that he was a bystander involved in the fight, right? Which can happen. Excuse me, I had to take a drink of water. So I just have questions, and that part on the floor is what really has me wondering. And the last thing that has me wondering is the police reaction to things. That is something that makes me very uncomfortable because, I mean, it does seem like it's because of homophobia. It also may seem like it's a type of xenophobia with an American. I don't know. I would love to hear from anybody who has experience in Vienna or maybe Austria that can maybe shed some light. And I would love to hear it was a misunderstanding that's not how it is. It's just the police have a different way of handling things or something that would tell us more than it was just hatred that created this case to be the way it was, because it doesn't seem like Aeryn did anything wrong. It just seems like something happened and we're never going to get answers. And this is a country that he loved, a city that he loved. He gave up everything in the States to live there, and it drew him in, and he felt compelled to become a part of it. And in the end, this country kind of let him down, and it hurts to see that. It's heartbreaking. And I'm hoping that perspective is incorrect. And I would love for, obviously, Kathy to get some answers. Maybe if we can get the word out more, somebody who has some sort of power can maybe create a documentary. I mean, we've seen documentaries have profound effects on people getting answers, like the West Memphis 3. If it wasn't for Lost in Paradise, those boys would probably still be rotting away in prison. It's helps in a lot of ways. So maybe in that sense, we can get somebody to relook at things. It's been so long that I know going over there, you probably won't find physical evidence, but I think there's a very strong possibility, it hasn't been that long, that witnesses to the area can shed some light. And I think if you ask enough people questions, then you're bound to find somebody that has the answer. And I think that's what we need to do next. I think that's the direction we have to go in. And I'm hoping that something like that happens, or if anything, somebody who is there maybe comes forward and anonymously even gives Kathy or someone information to get Kathy some answers on what happened that day. She may not be able to bring Aeryn home physically, but if she can get some closure, I think that would be the next best thing for her. Let me know what you think. I would love your thoughts. If there are any specific cases you want me to cover, please also let me know. If you like me covering unknown cases, keep me posted. But don't forget to like and subscribe.